The atmosphere on the plane shifted dramatically after Lisa slapped Karoline. Passengers exchanged uneasy glances, some whispering behind cupped hands while others openly stared at the scene unfolding in front of them. The flight attendants scrambled to regain control, but the tension was palpable. Security personnel quickly separated Lisa and Karoline, ensuring there wouldn't be any further escalation. Karoline, still fuming, refused to calm down. Her face burned red, not just from the slap, but also from embarrassment. She clutched her phone tightly in one hand, snapping photos of her reddened cheek for evidence. Richard, sitting beside her, tried to soothe her by offering quiet reassurances, but Karoline was having none of it. "This is unacceptable," she hissed, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "She can't just assault me like that and get away with it." Lisa, meanwhile, sat in the galley area under the watchful eyes of two security guards. Her heart raced as she replayed the moment over and over again in her mind. Yes, she'd lost her temper, but she couldn't shake the feeling that Karoline had deserved it, or at least provoked her into reacting. Still, she knew she'd crossed a line. Flight attendants were supposed to remain professional no matter what, and slapping a passenger was about as unprofessional as it got. As the plane continued its journey toward the destination, word of the incident reached the cockpit. The pilot, a seasoned man named George, immediately contacted ground control to report what had happened. "We've got a situation on board," he said calmly into the radio. "A flight attendant physically assaulted a passenger. We'll need authorities ready when we land." News traveled fast. Within minutes, the airline's headquarters received notification of the altercation. Someone in management recognized Karoline's name and realized who her husband was, Daniel Leavitt, one of the wealthiest men in the aviation industry. Daniel wasn't just another executive, he owned several private jets, including the one currently flying through the sky. When news of the slap reached him, he was furious. Daniel Leavitt was not a man accustomed to being challenged or disrespected. From his luxurious office overlooking the city skyline, he listened intently as his assistant relayed the details of the incident. His jaw tightened with each word. "Are you telling me someone hit my wife?" he asked, his voice low but laced with anger. "On my plane?" "Yes, sir," the assistant replied nervously. "They're handling it now, but nothing," Daniel interrupted sharply. "Find out everything you can about this flight attendant, who she is, where she works, everything, and make sure she knows exactly who she's dealing with." Back. On the plane, Lisa felt increasingly anxious. One of her colleagues, a fellow flight attendant named Megan, approached her cautiously. "Lisa, what were you thinking?" Megan whispered, keeping her voice low so the security guards wouldn't overhear. "You know how serious this is, right?" "I know," Lisa admitted, rubbing her temples. "I messed up. But you didn't. Hear the thing she was saying. It was insulting, demeaning. I couldn't just stand there and take it." Megan sighed, shaking her head. "I get it. Trust me, I do. But you don't understand the kind of power these people have. Do you even know who she is?" Lisa hesitated. "Not really. Just some social media influencer, right?" Megan gave her a pointed look. "That social media influencer is married to Daniel Leavitt. You've heard of him, haven't you? He owns this plane, and probably half the company we work for." Lisa's stomach dropped. She hadn't known that. Suddenly, the weight of what she'd done hit her harder than before. If Karoline's husband was as powerful as Megan suggested, then Lisa might be in far more trouble than she'd imagined. When the plane finally landed, airport authorities were waiting. As soon as the door opened, officers boarded the aircraft and escorted Lisa off the plane. Cameras flashed as reporters caught wind of the drama. Someone must have leaked the story online because social media was already buzzing with hashtags like Coors Slapgate and flight attendant drama. Lisa was taken to a small room at the terminal for questioning. An officer sat across from her, pen in hand, asking her to explain what had happened. Lisa recounted the events as honestly as she could, though she struggled to keep her emotions in check. "I'm not proud of what I did," she admitted, "but she was provoking me. She kept making these hurtful comments and I snapped. I shouldn't have hit her, but... The officer nodded, jotting down notes. We'll need a formal statement from you later, he said. For now, you're free to go, but don't leave town. We may need to speak with you again. Meanwhile, Karoline wasted no time capitalizing on the situation. With her phone in hand, she began live streaming to her followers, showing off her still red cheek and recounting her version of events. Can you believe this? She exclaimed, tears welling up in her eyes for dramatic effect. I was just minding my own business, sharing my thoughts, and this woman attacked me. On a plane. Where's the accountability? Her followers ate it up. Comments flooded in, many siding with Karoline and calling Lisa a menace. Others, however, weren't so quick to judge. Some pointed out that Karoline's inflammatory remarks likely played a role in escalating the situation. Social media erupted into chaos, with debates raging between liberals and conservatives about who was truly at fault. Word of the controversy spread beyond social media platforms. News outlets picked up the story, turning it into a national talking point. Talk show hosts debated whether Lisa's actions constituted self-defense, or if they were simply an overreaction. Pundits weighed in, dissecting every detail of the incident. By the end of the day, Lisa Harper's name was trending alongside Karoline Leavitt's. Amidst all the chaos, Lisa returned home, feeling overwhelmed and defeated. Her apartment felt smaller somehow, suffocating even. She collapsed onto her couch, staring blankly at the wall. Amanda Klein, her best friend since college, arrived shortly afterward, carrying a bag of takeout and a determined expression. You okay? Amanda asked gently, setting the food aside and sitting next to Lisa. Lisa shook her head. Not really. I messed up, Amanda. I let my emotions get the better of me, and now everyone hates me. They don't hate you, Amanda replied firmly. Sure, some people are mad, but others are sticking up for you, don't forget that. It doesn't matter, Lisa muttered. Even if people defend me, I still hit a passenger. That's grounds for getting fired, and maybe worse. What am I going to do? Amanda placed a reassuring hand on Lisa's shoulder. First, you're going to eat something. Then we're going to figure this out together, okay? Lisa managed a weak smile. Okay. Over dinner, Amanda encouraged Lisa to share everything that had happened, from the argument with Karoline to the realization that Daniel Leavitt owned the plane. As Lisa spoke, Amanda grew increasingly intrigued. Wait a second, she said suddenly. Did you say Daniel Leavitt? As in the Daniel Leavitt? The guy who's always in the news for shady business practices? Lisa nodded. Yeah, why? Amanda leaned forward, her eyes lighting up. Because if he's involved, we might have a bigger story here. Think about it. If this blows up, it could shift the focus away from the slap and onto him. Maybe we can expose some of the stuff he's been getting away with. Lisa frowned. What are you talking about? Daniel's company has a history of cutting corners, Amanda explained. Labor violations, environmental issues, you name it. If we dig deep enough, we might find something concrete. Something that proves he's not the victim here. For the first time since the incident, Lisa felt a flicker of hope. Maybe Amanda was right. Maybe this wasn't just about her losing control. It could be an opportunity to shine a light on something bigger, something important. The next morning, Lisa woke up with a heavy heart but a clearer mind. Amanda's words from the night before lingered in her thoughts. Maybe this wasn't just about her losing control or making a mistake. It could be an opportunity to uncover something bigger, something that mattered. But as she stared at the ceiling, she couldn't shake the weight of what lay ahead. Exposing someone like Daniel Leavitt wouldn't be easy. He had money, influence, and connections. Going after him would mean stepping into dangerous territory. Still, Lisa decided to trust Amanda. She called her friend early, asking if they could meet for coffee to discuss their next steps. By mid-morning, the two women were seated at a quiet cafe, laptops open and notebooks scattered across the table. Amanda wasted no time diving into research. Okay, she said, typing furiously. Let's start by looking into his company. Leavitt Aviation. I've heard rumors about labor, violations, and environmental shortcuts, so we'll focus on those areas first, Lisa nodded, sipping her coffee nervously. Where do we even begin? This feels huge. We start small, Amanda replied confidently. We look for patterns, complaints from employees, lawsuits, anything that points to unethical practices. And if we find something solid, we build a case around it. Over the next few hours, they combed through articles, legal documents, and social media posts. Slowly but surely, pieces of the puzzle began to emerge. One former employee described being forced to work long hours without overtime pay. Another mentioned unsafe working conditions at one of Leavitt's maintenance facilities. There were also reports of illegal dumping near airports where Leavitt Aviation operated. This is good, Amanda said, jotting down notes. It's not enough yet, but it's a start. We need more evidence, though, hard proof. Lisa hesitated. What? About talking to people directly? Like current or former employees? Amanda raised an eyebrow. That's risky. If word gets back to Leavitt, he'll shut us down before we can blink. I know, Lisa admitted. But maybe some of them want to speak out. They might just need someone to listen. After much deliberation, they agreed to take the risk. Amanda reached out to a few contacts she had in journalism circles, asking if anyone knew someone willing to share their story anonymously. Meanwhile, Lisa used her own network, former co-workers and friends who worked in aviation, to gather leads. Their efforts paid off sooner than expected. A week later, they met with Sarah Mitchell, a former mechanic at one of Leavitt's hangars. Sarah agreed to meet them in a park, wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap to avoid being recognized. I don't want any trouble, she said as they sat down on a bench. But what's happening at that company needs to be exposed. Sarah recounted stories of pressure from management to ignore safety protocols, equipment failures that went unreported, and toxic waste disposal methods that violated environmental laws. They care more about saving money than keeping people safe, she said bitterly. And anyone who speaks up gets fired, or worse. Lisa listened intently, her anger growing with each word. This wasn't just negligence, it was exploitation. Do you have any proof? She asked gently. Documents, emails, anything? Sarah nodded and pulled out a USB drive from her pocket. I saved everything I could before I left. Records, invoices, internal memos. It's all here. Amanda's eyes widened. This is huge. Thank you, Sarah. You're doing the right thing. With the new evidence in hand, Amanda and Lisa spent the following days organizing the information. They cross-referenced dates, names, and locations, piecing together a timeline of misconduct that painted a damning picture of Leavitt Aviation. The deeper they dug, the more convinced they became that this story could change everything. While Lisa and Amanda worked tirelessly behind the scenes, public opinion continued to shift online. Karoline's initial outrage had sparked a wave of support for her, but cracks were beginning to show. Some of her followers questioned why she hadn't addressed the provocative comments she'd made prior to the slap. Others pointed out the hypocrisy of claiming victimhood while attacking others verbally. Then, Amanda published her exposé. The article appeared on a popular investigative news website, complete with screenshots of leaked documents, testimonies from whistleblowers, and photos of hazardous working conditions. The headline read, "Behind the Glamour, the Dark Truth About Leavitt Aviation." Within hours, the story went viral. Readers were shocked by the allegations against Daniel Leavitt. Comment sections exploded with reactions ranging from disbelief to outrage. For many, the focus shifted away from the slap itself and onto the larger issue of corporate greed and exploitation. Karoline, however, wasn't ready to let go of the spotlight. Furious that attention had turned away from her, she doubled down on her narrative. In a series of tweets, she accused Lisa and Amanda of fabricating lies to distract from Lisa's violent behavior. "These people will stop at nothing to justify assault," she wrote. "Don't fall for their propaganda." Her attempts to sway public opinion only backfired. Critics argued that she was deflecting from the real issue, her husband's questionable business practices. Even some of her longtime supporters began to distance themselves, uncomfortable with how deeply entangled she seemed to be in the controversy. Daniel Leavitt, meanwhile, was livid. Sitting in his office, he scrolled through the exposé, his face reddening with rage. How dare they drag his name through the mud? He summoned his legal team immediately, demanding action. "Sue them," he barked. "Sue everyone involved. Make sure they regret ever crossing me." His lawyers sprang into motion, drafting defamation lawsuits against Amanda, Lisa, and anyone else associated with the investigation. They also issued veiled threats to potential whistleblowers, warning them of severe consequences if they cooperated further. Despite the mounting pressure, Lisa refused to back down. She realized now that standing up to injustice required courage and sacrifice. While she still regretted slapping Karoline, she understood that fighting for what was right meant facing challenges head-on. With Amanda by her side, she prepared for whatever came next. One evening, as they reviewed their findings, Amanda turned to Lisa with a serious expression. "Are you ready for this?" she asked. "Once we release everything, there's no turning back." Lisa took a deep breath, steeling herself. "I'm ready," she said firmly. "We can't let people like him win." The private jet soared smoothly through the sky, its engines humming softly as it carried a mix of passengers bound for different destinations. Among them was Karoline Leavitt, a well-known conservative influencer whose sharp opinions often sparked heated debates on social media. She sat comfortably in her seat near the front of the cabin, scrolling through her phone and occasionally glancing up to share a laugh with Richard Owens, the man seated beside her. Richard was a middle-aged businessman with salt and pepper hair and an air of quiet confidence. He wasn't particularly vocal, but listened intently whenever Karoline spoke. Today she was going on about politics, something she loved discussing almost as much as posting about on her Instagram feed. "You know," she said, leaning back in her chair, "I don't get why some people think being offended all the time is productive. It's exhausting." Richard chuckled politely, nodding along without committing too strongly to the conversation. But Karoline didn't need encouragement. She continued, "Like those liberals who act like every little thing is a personal attack. Honestly, they should toughen up." Her voice carried just enough for Lisa Harper, the flight attendant working nearby, to overhear. Lisa stopped mid-step, while refilling drinks at the galley station. Her brow furrowed slightly as she processed what Karoline had said. Lisa wasn't one to stay silent when someone made sweeping generalizations about groups of people, especially not when those statements hit close to home. Lisa was in her early 30s, with short brown hair and a warm smile that usually put passengers at ease. She prided herself on treating everyone equally, regardless of their background or beliefs. Off-duty, she volunteered at community events and advocated for marginalized communities. So hearing Karoline dismissively label an entire group of people as overly sensitive rubbed her the wrong way. She finished pouring the last drink and walked toward Karoline's row under the pretense of checking if everything was okay. "Can I get you anything else?" Lisa asked, keeping her tone light and professional despite the tension simmering beneath the surface. Karoline glanced up briefly before shaking her head. "No thanks," she replied curtly. Then turning back to Richard, she added, "Seriously, though, can we just call things how they are? People need thicker skin these days, that did it." Lisa couldn't let that slide. She took a deep breath and stepped closer, her expression shifting from polite indifference to steely resolve. "Excuse me," Lisa said firmly, interrupting their conversation. Both Karoline and Richard looked up, surprised by the sudden intrusion. "Yes?" Karoline asked, raising an eyebrow. There was a hint of irritation in her voice, as if annoyed that someone dared to interrupt her. "I couldn't help but overhear what you said," Lisa began, choosing her words carefully. "About liberals needing thicker skin? That kind of blanket statement isn't fair, or accurate." Karoline blinked, clearly taken aback by Lisa's boldness. For a moment, there was silence. Then she smirked, crossing her arms over her chest. "Well, excuse me for having an opinion," she shot back, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Or is expressing my thoughts now considered offensive?" "It's not your opinion that bothers me," Lisa countered, her voice steady despite the knot forming in her stomach. "It's the way you're painting an entire group of people with such a broad brush. Not everyone fits into the stereotypes you're throwing around." "Oh, please," Karoline scoffed, rolling her eyes dramatically. "Don't make this about me supposedly offending you. Sounds like you're just looking for something to be upset about." The comment stung more than Lisa cared to admit. She clenched her fists briefly, reminding herself to stay calm. This wasn't the first time she'd encountered someone like Karoline, someone who dismissed opposing viewpoints with casual disdain, but it never got easier to hear. Still, she tried again. "Look, I'm not saying you have to agree with me or anyone else, but maybe try listening instead of judging everyone based on labels." Karoline leaned forward, her smirk widening into something bordering on smugness. "And maybe you should stop playing the victim card every time someone disagrees with you. Seems like you're the one making assumptions here." Something inside Lisa snapped. The frustration, the countless arguments she'd had online and offline, the exhaustion of constantly defending her values, it all bubbled to the surface in an instant. Before she could stop herself, her hand shot out, connecting sharply with Karoline's cheek. The sound echoed through the otherwise quiet cabin, startling both passengers and crew alike. Everyone froze, staring wide-eyed at the scene unfolding before them. Karoline gasped, her hand flying to her reddening face. Richard sat frozen in his seat, unsure whether to intervene or simply watch. For a split second, Lisa regretted her actions. What had she done? Slapping someone, even someone as infuriating as Karoline, was completely unprofessional, but the damage was done. Passengers whispered nervously among themselves, and another flight attendant rushed over asking what happened. I'm sorry," Lisa stammered, though her apology lacked conviction. But she crossed a line. Karoline glared at her, fury blazing in her eyes. "You're going to regret that," she spat, her voice trembling with anger. "Do you even know who I am?" Lisa shook her head, trying to compose herself. "Honestly, I don't care who you are. No one talks to me or about people like me that way." Security personnel were called, and Lisa found herself escorted to the back of the plane to await further instructions. As she sat there replaying the incident in her mind, she realized she hadn't stopped to consider the potential consequences of her actions. All she knew was that she'd stood up for herself, for her beliefs, and that felt empowering, even if it came at a cost. Unbeknownst to Lisa, however, Karoline wasn't just any passenger. She was married to Daniel Leavitt, a billionaire entrepreneur whose company owned the very aircraft they were flying on. And Daniel did not take kindly to anyone embarrassing his wife or disrupting the smooth operation of his planes. The fallout from Amanda's expose hit Daniel Leavitt like a storm. For years he had operated in the shadows, insulated by his wealth and power. But now, the walls were closing in. Regulatory agencies took notice of the allegations against Leavitt Aviation, launching investigations into labor violations, environmental misconduct, and financial irregularities. Shareholders grew uneasy, questioning whether Daniel's leadership was sustainable or ethical. Despite the mounting scrutiny, Daniel refused to back down. He called an emergency meeting with his executives and legal team, pacing the room as he laid out his strategy. "We need to discredit them," he said sharply, pointing at photos of Lisa and Amanda displayed on a screen. "Make them look unstable, unreliable, anything to shift the focus away from us." His PR team went into overdrive, spinning counter-narratives designed to paint Lisa and Amanda as radicals out for revenge. They released statements claiming the expose was based on fabricated evidence and accused Lisa of orchestrating the entire scandal to justify her violent behavior. Social media bots amplified these messages, flooding platforms with hashtags like Crime Fake News and Stop the Smear Campaign. But not everyone bought it. Some journalists began digging deeper, uncovering even more troubling details about Leavitt Aviation. One reporter discovered that the company had secretly lobbied against safety regulations, prioritizing profits over passenger well-being. Another revealed how subcontractors hired by Leavitt routinely underpaid workers while skirting tax laws. Each new revelation chipped away at Daniel's carefully constructed image. Karoline, meanwhile, found herself increasingly isolated. Her attempts to rally support online faltered as public opinion shifted. People started asking why she hadn't addressed her own role in provoking Lisa. Memes mocking her hypocrisy circulated widely, and her follower count began to drop. Richard, who had initially stood by her side, grew distant, unsure how to navigate the chaos surrounding them. Lisa, on the other hand, faced a different kind of challenge. The defamation lawsuit filed by Daniel's lawyers loomed large, threatening to bankrupt her if she lost. Legal fees piled up, forcing her to dip into her savings and borrow money from friends. She spent sleepless nights worrying about what would happen if they couldn't prove their case. Yet, despite the stress, she remained resolute. Amanda worked tirelessly to bolster their defense. She tracked down additional whistleblowers willing to testify, including former managers who described being pressured to falsify records. One whistleblower provided audio recordings of meetings where Daniel himself had authorized cost-cutting measures that violated safety standards. These recordings became crucial pieces of evidence. To keep morale high, Lisa turned to community activism. She started volunteering at a local youth center, teaching conflict resolution skills to teenagers. It was her way of channeling frustration into something positive. Many of the kids admired her courage, seeing her as someone who stood up to injustice, even when it came at great personal cost. One evening, after a long day of volunteering, Lisa sat with Amanda in her small apartment, reviewing documents spread across the kitchen table. "Do you ever feel like this is too big for us?" Lisa asked, rubbing her temples. "Like we're just two people trying to take on a giant?" Amanda smiled faintly. "Maybe, but giants fall all the time. Remember? David and Goliath. Sometimes it's the little guy who wins." Lisa chuckled softly. "Yeah, but this isn't exactly a fair fight." "No, it's not," Amanda agreed. "But that doesn't mean we give up. We've come too far to let him scare us into silence." Their determination paid off when a major news outlet picked up their story. The segment featured interviews with whistleblowers, excerpts from leaked documents, and commentary from experts condemning Leavitt Aviation's practices. The broadcast reached millions of viewers, reigniting public outrage and prompting calls for accountability. Pressure mounted on Daniel from all sides. Regulators subpoenaed internal communications, forcing him to hand over emails and memos. Employees came forward en masse, sharing stories of mistreatment and unsafe conditions. Even some of his closest allies in the business world distanced, themselves fearing association with his tarnished reputation. For the first time in his life, Daniel felt vulnerable. His empire, once untouchable, was crumbling around him. He called an emergency board meeting, hoping to salvage what he could. But the directors, eager to protect their own interests, voted unanimously to remove him as CEO. The decision was swift and final. As Daniel left the building that evening, cameras flashing and reporters shouting questions, he looked smaller somehow, like a man who had finally been stripped of his armor. Karoline watched from afar, tears streaming down her face. She realized then that her husband's downfall wasn't just professional, it was personal. Their marriage, built on wealth and status, couldn't survive the collapse of his empire. Without Daniel's influence backing her, Karoline struggled to maintain relevance. Her social media presence dwindled, and sponsors dropped her contracts. Alone and disillusioned, she retreated from the spotlight, disappearing from public view. Lisa, however, emerged stronger than ever. Though she lost her job as a flight attendant, due to the controversy, she found new purpose as a speaker and advocate for workplace fairness. Her story inspired others to challenge toxic systems and stand up for what was right, even if it meant making mistakes along the way. One afternoon, Lisa received a letter from one of the whistleblowers she and Amanda had helped bring forward. "Thank you for giving me the courage to speak out," it read. "I used to think I was powerless, but now I know that standing together makes us strong." Tears welled up in Lisa's eyes as she folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. She thought about everything she'd been through, the slap, the backlash, the fear, and realized it had all led her here, to a place where she could make a difference. Amanda joined her later that evening, carrying a bottle of wine. "To surviving, The impossible, she said, raising a glass. Lisa smiled, clinking her glass against Amanda's. And to fighting for what's right. The final chapter of Lisa Harper's journey began not with a bang, but with quiet reflection. After months of turmoil, legal battles, and public scrutiny, life started to settle into a new rhythm. The investigations into Leavitt Aviation had uncovered enough evidence to hold Daniel accountable for years of unethical practices. Regulatory agencies fined his company heavily, and several executives faced criminal charges. Though Daniel avoided jail time due to clever lawyering, he was barred from ever holding a leadership position in the aviation industry again. For Karoline, the collapse of her husband's empire marked the end of an era. Without Daniel's money, or influence, she faded from the public eye entirely. Rumors circulated that she moved to a small town seeking anonymity and a fresh start. Whether she learned anything from the experience remained unclear, but her absence from social media spoke volumes about how much had changed. Lisa, on the other hand, embraced her newfound role as an advocate. She traveled across the country, speaking at conferences, community centers, and schools about the importance of standing up against injustice, even when it felt overwhelming. Her talks weren't just about the slap or the expose, they were about resilience, accountability, and finding strength in vulnerability. People listened because her story resonated deeply. It was messy, imperfect, and human. One day, while preparing for a speech at a local university, Lisa received an unexpected email. It was from Sarah Mitchell, the former mechanic who had risked everything by sharing incriminating documents about Leavitt Aviation. "I wanted to thank you again," Sarah wrote. "Because of what you did, I found the courage to start my own business. I'm helping other mechanics get fair wages and safe working conditions. None of this would have been possible without you." Reading the message brought tears to Lisa's eyes. For so long she had doubted herself, wondering if she'd made the right choices. But now, seeing how her actions had inspired others, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't known before. She replied simply, "Thank you for trusting me. We couldn't have done it without people like you." Amanda, too, continued to thrive in her career as a journalist. The expose on Leavitt Aviation earned her widespread recognition, opening doors to bigger opportunities. Yet she never forgot the partnership she shared with Lisa. Their friendship had deepened through the chaos, forged in the fire of adversity. They often joked that they should write a book together someday, but for now they were content celebrating their victories quietly. As weeks turned into months, Lisa decided it was time to step back onto a plane, not as a crew member but as a passenger. The thought made her nervous at first. Memories of the incident still lingered, and she wondered how others might react if they recognized her. But Amanda encouraged her to face her fears. "You can't let one bad moment define your entire life," she said firmly. "Besides, flying is supposed to be fun, remember?" So on a crisp autumn morning, Lisa boarded a commercial flight bound for Chicago. She chose a window seat, clutching her boarding pass tightly as she navigated the narrow aisle. When the plane took off, she closed her eyes, letting the hum of the engine soothe her nerves. For the first time in ages, she felt free. Free from guilt, free from fear, free to imagine a future unburdened by the past. Looking out the window, Lisa marveled at the clouds drifting lazily below. She thought about how far she'd come since that fateful day on Daniel's private jet. What began as a moment of anger had transformed into something greater, a movement for change, a testament to the power of perseverance. Mistakes had been made, yes, but growth came from learning, and Lisa had learned more than she ever imagined possible. When the plane landed, Lisa disembarked with a renewed sense of purpose. As she walked through the terminal, she noticed a young woman staring at her wide-eyed. For a moment, Lisa braced herself, unsure what to expect. But then the woman smiled shyly and approached her. "Are you Lisa Harper?" she asked hesitantly. "Yes," Lisa replied, smiling back. "That's me." "I just wanted to say thank you," the woman said quickly, her cheeks flushing red. "Your story gave me hope when I needed it most. Thank you for standing up, even when it was hard. Touched. Lisa nodded. Thank you for saying that, it means a lot. They parted ways shortly after, but the encounter stayed with Lisa long after she left the airport. It reminded her that every action, no matter how small, could ripple outward, touching lives in ways she might never fully understand, and that realization filled her with gratitude. In the weeks that followed, Lisa dedicated herself to building a nonprofit organization aimed at supporting workers in the aviation industry. With Amanda's help, she secured funding and recruited volunteers passionate about creating safer, fairer workplaces. The project became her legacy, a way to ensure that the lessons she'd learned wouldn't fade with time. One evening, as she sat on her apartment balcony watching the sunset, Lisa reflected on everything she'd been through. Life hadn't turned out the way she'd planned, but perhaps that was a good thing. She had grown in ways she never anticipated, discovering strength she didn't know she possessed. Most importantly, she had learned that fighting for justice wasn't about being perfect, it was about being brave. The sky glowed orange and pink, casting a warm light over the city. Lisa leaned back in her chair, sipping tea and feeling a rare moment of calm. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew she could face them. After all, she had already faced giants and won.